You want them back. And somewhere deep inside, you already know that if you just do the right thing at the right moment in the right way, they'll come back. But here's what nobody tells you. There's one thing you need to do before any of that. Before the text, before the call, before the conversation you've been rehearsing in your head at 2 a.m. And if you skip this one thing, everything else you try will push them further away. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because you're doing it without understanding what's actually happening inside an avoidant mind you've replayed it so many times. Every conversation, every moment where things shifted, you've gone back through old messages trying to find the exact second things changed. And the worst part isn't the distance. The worst part is that you've seen another version of this person, a warm version, a version that looked at you in a way that made you feel completely chosen. And now that version seems like it was never real. You check your phone first thing in the morning, not because you expect a message, but because some part of you hopes today is different. And when it isn't, and it usually isn't, you feel that familiar drop in your chest, that mix of longing and confusion that you can't quite explain to anyone who hasn't felt it. Your friends tell you to move on. They say things like, you deserve better, or they clearly don't care. And you sit there nodding because you love your friends, but you also know they don't understand. Because this isn't about deserving. It's about the specific person, this specific connection. Something about them reached a part of you that nothing else has. And that doesn't just switch off because someone tells you it should. So you've done the research. You've watched the videos. You've read the articles about avoidant attachment. You understand the words now: deactivating, dismissive, fearful. You can label the pattern. But knowing the label hasn't made the pain smaller. It hasn't made it easier to stop checking their Instagram story at midnight just to feel some tiny connection to them. You're not obsessed. You're not needy. You're a deeply feeling person who formed a real bond with someone who doesn't know how to stay. And you're sitting here right now because you want to understand not just what went wrong, but what you can actually do about it. That's not weakness. That's someone who takes love seriously. And I want you to know before we go any further, I see you exactly where you are. I want to share something with you before we get into the heart of this, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just theory I read in a book. It comes from years of studying how human attachment actually works, not just how we wish it worked, but how it actually functions inside the nervous system of someone with avoidant patterns. Attachment theory was first developed by John Bowlby in the 1960s. He discovered that the way we connect with our earliest caregivers creates a kind of internal blueprint, a template our brain uses for every relationship that follows. When a child grows up in an environment where love was inconsistent, conditional, or came with the cost of losing independence, that child learned something very specific. They learn that needing someone is dangerous, that getting too close means getting hurt. And they carry that lesson, completely unconsciously, into every adult relationship they ever have. A landmark study from researchers Hazan and Shaver in 1987 took Bowlby's childhood framework and applied it directly to romantic relationships. What they found was striking. Avoidant adults weren't cold because they didn't feel. They were avoidant because they felt too much and had learned to suppress it as a survival strategy. Their nervous system had been trained, over years and years, to treat emotional closeness as a threat. That changes how you need to think about everything. Because if you approach getting an avoidant back the way you would approach a secure person, with directness, emotional openness, and clear expressions of need, you will accidentally trigger every defense they have. Not because they don't want you, but because their nervous system interprets your closeness as danger before their heart even gets a chance to respond. I spent years working through this, both in my own experience and with the people I've worked with. And what I kept seeing was the same pattern. Good people, real love, completely derailed by a misunderstanding of what was actually happening beneath the surface. Today I'm going to walk you through what that one thing is that you need to do first. And more importantly, I'm going to help you understand exactly why it works when almost everything else doesn't. Before you do anything, before you send a message, before you plan a conversation, before you decide whether to give space or reach out, you need to completely reframe what you're actually trying to achieve here. When most people say they want an avoidant back, they picture something specific. They picture the avoidant suddenly realizing what they had, reaching out, opening up, becoming the consistent, warm, present partner they always had the potential to be. And yes, that can happen, but not in the way most people try to make it happen. Here's the psychology behind it. An avoidant person's nervous system is wired to interpret pursuit as pressure. This isn't a choice they make consciously. It's a deep neurological response. When you come toward them, even with love, even with good intentions, their system reads it as a threat to their autonomy and triggers what psychologists call the deactivating strategy. They pull back. They go cold. They create distance. Not to punish you, but because distance is literally how they regulate their internal emotional state. Think about it in terms of a real scenario. Imagine you've been no contact for 2 weeks. You're feeling strong. You draft a heartfelt message. You tell them you've been thinking about them, that you miss them, that you feel like what you had was real and worth fighting for. You hit send, and then nothing, or worse, a one-line response that leaves you more confused than before. What happened? You came forward with warmth and vulnerability, and their nervous system responded with distance. Not because they don't feel anything, but because feeling something triggered the very response that's been protecting them since childhood. What this means for you is this. Getting an avoidant back isn't about convincing them to love you. It's about creating the specific internal conditions under which their own feelings become safe enough for them to feel. That's a completely different mission, and everything changes when you understand it that way. Now, this next point is something most people completely overlook, and it's probably the most practical thing I'll share today. Here it is, the one thing, and I know it might not be what you were expecting, but stay with me because this is everything. Before you do anything to get an avoidant back, the single most important thing you need to do is regulate your own nervous system. I know you were hoping for a specific text to send, a strategy, a script, and we'll get to the practical side. But none of it works if you skip this. And here's the psychological reason why. When your nervous system is dysregulated, meaning when you are operating from a place of anxiety, fear of abandonment, or desperate longing, every single action you take will carry that energy. The avoidant will feel it, not consciously, not as a thought, but as a sensation. Their body will detect your anxiety before their mind processes your words. And that anxiety, that desperation, is the exact signal their nervous system is trained to run from. This is rooted in something called co-regulation. It's a real neurobiological process described by researchers like Stephen Porges in his polyvagal theory. The idea is that our nervous systems constantly read each other. When you're dysregulated, the person near you, especially someone already primed toward avoidance, will feel that dysregulation and respond by increasing their own protective distance. Picture this. You haven't heard from them in a week. Your anxiety is at its peak. You finally reach out. Your message is carefully worded, but underneath every sentence is the unspoken plea. Please come back. Please tell me I matter. Please don't leave me. They can feel all of it, even if they can't name it. And what they feel isn't love being extended to them. What they feel is someone whose emotional state requires something from them. And that requirement is exactly what an avoidance entire system is designed to escape. Now contrast that with reaching out after you've genuinely, not performatively, regulated yourself. You're not chasing them. You're not pretending. You've done real internal work. Your message comes from a place of groundedness. The energy underneath, it is completely different. And their nervous system reads that difference too. Regulation doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you become cold or detached. It means you are no longer operating from the wound. You're operating from a stable place inside yourself. And that is the only position from which anything you do will actually land the right way. And I need you to stay with me here because this next part changes everything that I want to be very clear about this because I see a lot of well-meaning advice online that completely misunderstands regulation. Regulation is not the same as playing games. It's not pretending you don't care. It's not manufacturing distance as a manipulation tactic to make them chase you. That approach might occasionally trigger a short-term response from an avoidant, but it doesn't create the thing you actually want, which is genuine, sustained reconnection. Real regulation is an internal shift, not a performance. Psychologically, it works like this. When you are anxiously attached and pursuing an avoidant, your prefrontal cortex, the rational, calm, decision-making part of your brain, is essentially offline. Your amygdala, your threat detection center, has taken over. Everything you do comes from that threat response. Every message, every decision, every interpretation of their behavior is filtered through a nervous system that is convinced the relationship is about to end and that you need to act now. Regulation means bringing that prefrontal cortex back online. It means creating enough internal safety that you can think clearly, act with intention, and respond rather than react. So what does that actually look like in real life? Here's a scenario that will probably feel familiar. They post something on social media, maybe something ambiguous, maybe something that makes you wonder if it's about you or about someone else or about the relationship, and immediately your mind starts running. You screenshot it, you send it to a friend, you analyze every word, you draft 3 different responses. Your heart is pounding. You feel sick with anxiety. That is a dysregulated state. And anything you do from that state will make things harder, not easier. Regulation in that moment looks like this. You notice the spiral starting. You close the app. You take 10 slow breaths. And I mean genuinely slow, because diaphragmatic breathing directly activates the vagus nerve and calms your nervous system. This is not just mindfulness advice. This is physiology. You get up and move your body. You call a friend not to analyze the situation, but to feel connected and grounded. You remind yourself that your worth is not determined by their posting behavior. And then, only then, if you decide to respond, you do it from a place of actual calm, not perform calm. Real calm. That is what makes the difference, not the words. The internal state behind the words that a lot of people hear give an avoidance space, and they interpret that as a passive strategy. You just wait. You just go quiet. You just disappear and hope they come back. And while space is genuinely important when dealing with avoidant attachment, there's a critical misunderstanding here that I want to address directly. Space without internal work is just suffering in silence, and it doesn't move things forward. Here's why this matters psychologically. An avoidant person does not miss the version of you that was anxious, pursuing, and emotionally dysregulated. Even if they had real feelings for you, the dominant memory in their nervous system is the version of you that triggered their defenses, the pulling, the pushing for closeness, the moments where your anxiety may have escalated into arguments or emotional flooding. That is the version their system is protecting itself from. What they need to experience before they can genuinely move toward reconnection is a version of you that feels different. Not different in a fake way. Genuinely different. A version that has done real work. A version that radiates enough security that their nervous system doesn't immediately go into protection mode. Let me give you a specific example. 2 people both go no contact with their avoidant ex for 30 days. Person A spends those 30 days refreshing the avoidance profile, obsessing over who they might be talking to, rehearsing conversations, and counting down the days until they can reach out. Person B spends those 30 days doing genuine inner work. They journal. They talk to a therapist or a coach. They reconnect with their own identity outside the relationship. They work through their own attachment wounds. They get to a place where they feel genuinely okay. Not because they've stopped caring, but because they've found enough security within themselves that the outcome doesn't feel like life or death anymore. 30 days later, both people reach out. The avoidant can feel the difference, not because they read a long explanation of everything the person did, but because the energy behind the first message is completely different. One carries desperation. One carries groundedness. And an avoidance nervous system will open toward groundedness in a way it will never open toward desperation, no matter how beautifully the desperate message is written. Before I continue, I want you to think about your own situation right now. Which version of that 30 days have you been living? This one is perhaps the most important thing I will tell you today. And I say that knowing I've already said some things that mattered, but this is different. This goes to the core of everything. If you are someone who repeatedly finds yourself drawn to avoidant people, and many of you watching will recognize this pattern, there is something very specific happening inside you that is worth understanding. Not to blame yourself, never to blame yourself, but to understand yourself. The reason anxiously attached people and avoidantly attached people have such intense chemistry with each other is not random. It's psychological. Both styles were created in response to early environments where love felt unpredictable or conditional. The anxious person learned to move toward love harder and louder to make sure it didn't disappear. The avoidant person learned to move away from love before it could hurt them. These two patterns create a magnetic pull between them, not because they're good for each other necessarily, but because each one unconsciously activates the other's deepest emotional patterns. What this means is that your longing for the specific avoidant person is not just about them. Part of it, a significant part, is about something much older that lives inside you, a place that learned that love comes with uncertainty. That closeness requires fighting for, that you have to earn the right to be loved consistently. Here's a scenario that might land differently than you expect. Think about the moment in the relationship when you felt most anxious, most desperate, most like you would do anything to get them to stay. Now, ask yourself honestly, was that only about this person? Or did it feel older than that? Did it feel like a wound that existed before they ever came along? For most people I work with, when they sit with that question honestly, the answer is yes. It felt older. Because it is older, this is not weakness. This is not something to be ashamed of. This is a human response to a human experience. But it is also where the real work is. And here's what matters for your specific goal right now. The work you do on that wound, that old, deep, pre-verbal wound around love and worthiness, that work will do more to bring your avoidant back, and more importantly, to create a healthy relationship if they do come back, than any strategy, any text, any amount of perfectly timed space. Because when you heal that wound, you stop needing their validation to feel whole. And when you stop needing their validation to feel whole, you become the most attractive version of yourself to someone with avoidant attachment. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you actually have it. If nothing else from this video, I want you to remember this one thing. The most powerful thing you can do to get an avoidant back is to stop needing them back in order to be okay. Some point, after the internal work, after the genuine regulation, there may come a moment when reaching out feels right. And I want to give you a clear framework for how to do that in a way that actually opens a door rather than accidentally closing one. The first thing to understand is that avoidants respond to low pressure, not coldness, not games, low pressure. What that means in practice is that your reach out should never contain an agenda. It should never carry the weight of needing a specific response. It should feel to them like you reaching out because you genuinely wanted to, not because you need something from them. Psychologically, this works because it doesn't trigger their deactivating response. A message that says, "I've been thinking about us, and I think we should talk about what happened," immediately activates their defenses. It requires something. It implies weight. It threatens their sense of autonomy. But a message that says, "I thought about you today. I heard that band you liked is releasing something new," is light. It's warm. It doesn't require them to do anything. And it gives them permission to respond or not respond without the relationship being at stake either way. This is called a low-investment open door. You're not closing yourself off. You're not pretending you don't care. You're simply creating an opening that doesn't threaten them. And an avoidant whose nervous system feels safe will naturally move toward warmth when they don't feel trapped by it. Here's a scenario. 2 weeks after genuine no contact, not punishment-based no contact, but real space during which you did real work. You see something that genuinely reminds you of them, not an excuse to reach out. Genuinely reminds you of them. You send one simple, warm, low-pressure message. No expectations attached. No hidden agenda. And then you genuinely let go of the outcome. This last part is crucial. You genuinely let go of the outcome. Not as a strategy. Genuinely. Because you've done enough internal work that their response or non-response doesn't determine your value or your peace anymore. That combination, genuine warmth, low pressure, and real non-attachment outcome, is the most effective thing you can do, not because it tricks them, because it communicates something real to their nervous system. It says, "I'm here, I'm warm, and I'm safe. I want to talk to you honestly about something that doesn't get said enough in this space." Not every avoidant relationship can be repaired, and not every avoidant person is at a place in their own journey where reconnection is possible right now. No matter how much work you do, no matter how regulated you become, no matter how perfectly you execute everything I've shared today, this is not me giving up on your situation. This is me respecting you enough to tell you the truth. Psychologically, an avoidant person can only move toward secure connection when a certain level of self-awareness exists inside them. If they have no understanding of their own patterns, if they've never sat with the discomfort of their avoidance, never questioned why they pull away, never felt the loss of someone they pushed away deeply enough to examine themselves, then your healing, while powerful and real, may not be enough to open that door right now. What I've seen consistently is this. The relationships that repair well are ones where the avoidant person has also had some kind of internal reckoning. They've felt the loss. They've started asking their own questions. They haven't necessarily done years of therapy, but something has cracked open in them. And when your regulated, grounded energy meets that cracking open, real reconnection becomes possible. The relationships that do not repair, at least not yet, are ones where the avoidant is still fully defended, where they haven't yet felt the loss in a way that moved them, where the distance still feels more comfortable than the closeness. And in those cases, the most loving and powerful thing you can do is continue your own healing, not as a strategy to get them back, but because you deserve to be whole regardless of what they choose. I need you to hear both sides of this. Repair is possible. Real, deep, lasting repair is absolutely possible. And it requires both of you to be in a place where it can happen. Your work is your side of that equation.